So, um, this video is the purpose of this video, or the reason why I did this video, has been spurred by a recent event today while I was at work. And as I observed it unfold in real time, a lot of insights, the Lord just kind of flooded my mind with some insights into human behavior. And given those insights, I then felt impressed to share them. I'm also a little sick, so I might interrupt this video with some coughs and throat clearing, and I apologize ahead of time. Um, but I don't really intend to make this video again, so it's just going to get me as I am. So I was at work today. It was kind of in the afternoon, and normally at work I listen to some podcasts while I'm doing work. Just something additional. I'm always trying to keep a flow of information coming to me. And sometimes at work, I have some projects where I can kind of listen to my podcast in the background. But anyways, I had my earbuds in and I started to hear some noise from outside my window. And where I work, we're in downtown Salt Lake City, um, and I'm on the third floor, so about three stories up. So in a given day, I can hear noise down on the street level, but I don't hear everything. And so with passerbys, usually their conversations I won't hear. But why that matters is because as I was listening to the podcast, I could hear very clearly, I could hear yelling, very loud and intense yelling outside my window. And I was pretty shocked because, me listening to a podcast, the volume, you think that kind of drown out some of it. And it wasn't. It was really, really loud and distinct. And so I turned off my podcast and I looked out the window and I could see a man on a motorized scooter, ones that you, um, boy, I don't know what you call them, the ones that you rent around the city. Anyways, he was on the scooter and he was yelling at a lady. And continued to listen, and it wasn't out of entertainment. It was, I literally thought that the man was going to hit her, and I wanted to be there to see it, to document it, to in case the police asked or anything, um, because I could hear what was going on. That's how intense the yelling was, and I mean, was frightened for the lady. I truly thought it was going to come to a physical altercation. It was already a verbal altercation for sure, but I thought it was going to rise to a physical, and there was going to be hitting. And so I was watching intently. And then as they continued to yell, the woman then responded, yelling back to him. And there was this period of back and forth yelling. And then eventually, I'm not exactly sure what the issue was, but it came to my understanding. And I learned that they were either, well, they were in a relationship of some sort, friendly relationship or romantic relationship. There was some type of relationship, because then she started to say, "Oh, well, you shouldn't talk to me like that," and the man was still yelling, and then eventually she got on the scooter with the man and then drove off, and they were still yelling at each other as they're driving down the sidewalk. Okay, so what does it have to do with anything? Well, what is so interesting about that experience is that for, well, first of all, for any passerby who is, for any reasonable bystander, let's put it that way, a reasonable bystander would see what I saw and say that is uncalled for a man to yell at a woman like that, and in that regard, and in that manner, in that tone, especially that posture. I mean, it looked like he was going to hit her. And so a reasonable bystander would see that and say, that's crazy. You should never do that. Okay. And even also, uh, although norms are changing, generally a man is never to treat a woman in the way this man treated her. It was absolutely horrendous. And if I mean, I can't even imagine myself. I mean, I've gotten in obviously arguments with my wife or other people. I've never in that degree yelled in that manner, um, and just absolutely was cursing at her and everything. And so, giving that, the reasonable bystander would say, "Oh wow, this is pretty crazy." Um, but at the same time, the lady herself has to know. I mean, by the way she responded, that that treatment was uncalled for. And she kind of called him out and said, you never yelled at me like that, whatever. But the thing that's so crazy is that she still stayed with him for whatever reason. And if they're in a relationship, I would imagine that this is not the first time he's yelled like this, just given the whole nature. Just this was something too common. It wasn't like apologize or whatever. It was just like, that's how I am. And so leads me to believe that this is an ongoing thing that she deals with, whether it's a friendship or romantic relationship. She is dealing with borderline verbal abuse, and she this isn't the first time, but yet she stays in it, and that was evidenced by the fact that she went on the scooter with the man, and they rode off together, yelling at each other as they were riding down. And so, what this ultimately gets to, and why I'm sharing this video, is that it gets to the larger point about us is that in my discussions with a lot of, well, not a lot, but with some people, a common thing that's come up is people, telling me that, when done I've done certain, I often do things that I know I shouldn't do, and I do it anyways. And like, I know it's wrong. That's what they tell me. I know it's wrong, but I continue to do it. And that really gets to the heart of the matter when it comes to our relationship with God. There was on, I want to say Twitter X, there was a post asking, well, what does it mean to become a sinner? And I responded that, well, conceptually speaking, being a sinner is one that has departed away from God. But more practically speaking, a sinner is someone, and I'm trying to remember what I said exactly, but a sinner is someone who habitually disregards their conscience, um, and does that, yeah, habitually disregards their conscience. Because one of the things that we've been given through God is the light of Christ. And the light of Christ communicates to our conscience. It is our conscience. It is what our conscience. The light of Christ is our conscience. It's that light within us that helps us to know whether something's good or bad. And when we obey our conscience, that light becomes brighter and brighter. We gather more light, and that informs our thinking, and we understand more of what's wrong and what's right. And what's the truth of the matter of a lot of people is that they disregard their conscience. And just like this lady, I mean, I would take a strong, yeah, I mean, I would be pretty positive that she knows she's not in a good relationship. And I remember, you know, back in, I guess, high school or college, when I had friends who were dating, I guess, girls dating guys, and the guys were treating them crappy. And it was like, we could obviously see, everyone could see that the guy was no good. Even, I think, if I remember right, like, the girl would say, "Yeah, but I like him," or, "Oh, but he does this," or whatever. They know it, but then they rationalize away their their inner understanding, their conscience. Their conscience is telling them you're not in a good relationship. You should get out, but they find reasons to rationalize that way, and that's extremely dishonest. And a lot of times, that's what honesty in the gospel refers to: is just being honest with ourselves and what we really should be doing. And I think the more I've kind of studied and pondered about human behavior and sin and talking to people, the more I realize that a lot of times, um, a lot more people disregard their conscience, I guess, more than might think. That people know, what I'm trying to say is that people know what to do, they know what they should do, more often than we think. And they know what they should do, but they don't do it. And I know that was the same with me. And I know before, I gave my life to Christ and um, truly repented, that I was living a life and I knew that the things that I was doing were not right, but I would justify it. I'd say, oh, yeah, but like I'm trying hard, or I'm really a good person. I just had this little, this little weakness. Um, and I'm sure God understands. I mean, everyone's imperfect. God's loving. Just it's crazy. It's the same thing that people tell themselves all the time. Well, God can't. He'll look over that. I mean, it's what the Book of Mormon says. Oh, He'll justify a little sin, whatever. You tend to believe that because you have to assuage your guilt. You know what you're doing is wrong, yet you still do it because you're too lazy to change. And I'm not saying you necessarily to the listener, although it could be true and likely is. I was the same way. I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I kept doing it because I thought I just didn't want to change. I didn't want to give up my lifestyle for something different. I thought that I could get both, that I didn't have to change, and the world led me to believe it. And so, what the takeaway from this video is really just simply that: is look through your life, examine your life, or at least step back. If you want to get closer to God, one way to do it is to look at your life and identify all the times in your day or the week when you have done things that you know you shouldn't have done. Whether it was a little lie, whether it was gossiping, whether it was involving, pornography, it was just looking at a, certain photo on the internet, maybe not really hardcore porn, but just like, some photo, and you got aroused by that. I mean, and you shouldn't have. It can be so many things, and I think a lot of it's with in our work, those who are working and how they I don't know if they're on wages, how they report their time. Um, I know as a lawyer, there is that tendency to maybe overbill, right? And so I'm always very sensitive to how I bill, and I try to be very honest, and I make sure that how I'm billing is honest and not overbilling, because there is that tendency. But because I mean, it's a lot for lawyers. They have to bill a lot. Some lawyers to bill tons, and so there can be that tendency to try to get more hours in than they deserve, just so they don't have to work as much, or just so they can keep up. But anyways, whatever it is, there's so many situations in life that we're faced with where we make choices, and it's important to look at those and see how many times we make choices we know we shouldn't make. Our conscience, deep down, that voice inside us is telling us, no, that's not the right choice, but yet we rationalize it away. Because that's something that what I'm learning that God is going to pay attention to. Well, not going to, it's what He pays attention to. And it's what we'll be judged by is the light we have. Scripture that talks about we're judged by the light, that's what it's referring to, right? Our conscience. Every time that conscience tells us to do something, how do we respond? And if we disobey it, then we continue to disobey it, then we are sinners, and we're living in a state of rebellion from God because we are doing what we shouldn't do, because the conscience is telling us what we should do. So, anyways, I think the title of this post is going to be, ignoring the sun at noonday. I know that has some connotations with unpardonable sin. I'm not going that far, but more to the point is when we ignore our conscience, we're kind of doing that. We see the sun, and we're saying, no, it's not there. I'm choosing to believe that the sun doesn't exist or is not there. It's not shining in my face. I'm just going to close my eyes and go along my merry way. And that's extremely dishonest. And it's in a position away from God. And when we do that, we can't really complain when our lives don't turn out the way we want it to.